Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us. Just wanted to let you know a couple of announcements. First, Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota, GCN. Another thing is the call line, if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. And I called our announcer and spoke with him at length yesterday after the broadcast. His name is Ron Allen, and he's the one who has guided me from day one. And we touch base every, maybe once a year or so. And I've invited him to be on the air, and he's going to be on. And I told him about the doublespeak and what my thoughts were on how people aren't paying attention to anything, anywhere. And radio announcements and advertisements had to be adjusted downward so that the lowest common denominator can understand what's being said. So on the 24th of January, hour number 2, Ron Allen will be with us, and he will be sharing what he has determined as well in terms of what's happening with people's minds and communications, radio communications specifically, because that's his area of expertise. Next thing tonight on republicbroadcasting.org, I am John Statmiller's guest at 6 p.m. Central Time tonight, 6 p.m. Central Time on Republic Broadcasting. Next, on Friday, hour number 1, Kyle Harris is going to be talking about tips, survival-type tips. And hour number 2, I'll be talking about tips from the book. So all of Friday, tips that you might want to know. And we've been looking all over for Rich Scheben for the last couple of weeks. We've been looking all over. We did find him. Here he is. And welcome back, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vince. When you live off grid and you live off the land, there's just certain things that you have to do, and I appreciate my little hiatuses that you give me, and I am back to hopefully wake up some more people today.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking, Rich, about your lifestyle, the kind of things we do here at the farm, and the word boredom is never even considered in the way we live. Never have I heard you say, and in all the years we've known each other and talked and been at the farmhouse together, I've never heard you say, "Hey, Vinny, I'm really bored." But I have heard you say, "I got to go. I got so many things I got to finish up, before it gets dark, before it rains, before it snows. You got to take care of the animals, During the commercial breaks, you race off and take care of, things at the farm." You've never said you're bored. Never, not once.
Well, you can't be bored, especially when you live in Montana. You have, I came here for nature, for the natural world, for outdoors. Basically, if you don't commit violence against other people and you don't need artificial means like drugs to be high, that's my life, okay? That being said, seasonality in Montana, because we have all 4 seasons in the fullest, all the interests and hobbies and chores are never the same. They literally revolve around seasonality. So one of my biggest fears in life is being bored. And that's never a problem because I have so many interests and hobbies in the natural world. And you were mentioning at the beginning of the show, Vince, I just thought of something when you were talking about how when you were talking about doublespeak, how so many people aren't paying attention.
Right.
And, with all the financial stress, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, an article came out where 70% of Americans don't even have $1,000 in their savings account. I think a lot of people aren't paying attention because they're broke, they're in fear, there's a lot of despair, there's no nutrients in our food anymore, and this is at every level. This is all the way up to Congress.
Before we go into the economic, financial, and society update that you'll be presenting in just a minute, right? I just wanted to mention what that $1,000 means. When you say that we don't have $1,000, that means if you have an automobile and your water pump fails and leaks, there's $1,000. If you have an all-wheel drive car that requires that all the tires be within 2/32 of an inch in diameter, meaning, let's say, 15% worn out. So if you have tires that are 15% worn out or more, 85% tread left, and you get a puncture and it cannot be fixed, you can't just get one new tire just like the one that just ripped or can't be fixed. You'll have to buy 4 of them because you'll tear up your transfer case on the all-wheel drive. So now you're looking at $1,000. So what I'm saying is you hit one pothole wrong, and you might have to buy 4 new tires if you have an all-wheel drive car. And a lot of modern cars are all-wheel drive. So it's $1,000 for tires there, $1,000 if you have truck tires, and it's 4-wheel drive, because 4-wheel drive you can have slightly different size tires if you had to, okay? But those tires are expensive. So if you have an air conditioning leak and it needs to be fixed, that might be $1,000. If you have a steering system problem where you need tie rod ends or a steering rack, $1,000. So $1,000 goes really fast. One automobile problem can cost you $1,000. And what you're saying, and it's true, most people can't pay that. They don't have that. So now what do they do? What do they do?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of stress out there, Vince. And, there's a lot of hypocrisy and double standards by the powers that be, and that creates more confusion and more anger. And I think a lot of people are looking for plan Bs in life. I mean, if you just look how people are voting with their feet right now, there's a big movement out of California, the West Coast, the Northeast, Illinois, and quite a few other states that are going broke. And the masses are going to states like Florida, Texas, and the Rocky Mountain states. And, when you see what's happening in Virginia, you got these Democrat fascists, and they are fascists because they are proponents of big government and the alliance of big corporate America to control the people. They're saying we're going to take away your guns when the government can't even protect one rich guy, a.k.a. Jeffrey Epstein, in prison on suicide watch, yet they have to disarm us for our own safety. I just want that to sink in, and I think that's playing a lot on the minds of people. The same government that can't keep a key witness alive during a suicide watch promises to keep you safe with more gun control. These are the hypocrisies and double standards that's occurring all over America and the Western world. And I think the little people do not have a voice. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why I'm going to give, after being out for 2 weeks, I'm just going to give a broad general assessment using financial, economic, social, and political rationale where we are today. And everything I'm going to say, folks, everything, I have given examples, specific details over the past several months to prove this. But I'm just going to give a broad general assessment of where we are today. And I want you to look at the corruption behind this. I want you to figure out, who do you call? And Vince, whenever you give me the okay, I will be more than happy to start.
Okay. There you go. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to sit back and take notes.
Okay. We have only a few minutes left. This is going to probably take me a few segments, folks. But I'm going to start out with what I thought I was going to do at the end, and that's give a few articles, a string of articles to show the corruption. And I want you to think about when things occur, crimes, false flags, lies, gaslighting, propaganda, who do you call? And that's a big question that really is difficult to answer. So I'm going to mention a few articles here. I want you to think about this before I go on my little rant. 96% of DOJ, Department of Justice, political donations went to Hillary Clinton and liberal groups. Next article. 5 New Jersey politicians took cash bribes stuffed in coffee cups. Next article. New documents show State Department knew about Hillary Clinton's secret email account. Next article. Former NSA tech chief says Mueller report was based on CIA fabricated evidence. Next article. From 1999 to 2014, Ukraine donated more money to the Clinton Foundation than any other country, foreign country. And Biden, Pelosi, Kerry, and Romney all have children working for the Ukraine gas companies. Now, these are all published articles in the public domain in America. I'm not making this up. Next article. UN, United Nations, sex exploitation. Haiti peacekeepers fathered hundreds of babies, then let them live in misery. Next article. Senate should charge Pelosi with obstruction of Congress. Yes, they should. Next article. 19 million public employees across the country are making a fortune on the taxpayers, nearly $1 trillion. Next article. Trump, this is from AOC. Trump is afraid of strong Latino women like me. She's the one who's friends with Ilhan Omar, who said that Latinos cannot compete in a merit-based society. See, folks, the hypocrisies and double standards are beyond, you can't even put a word to it. It's so beyond control. We have so much corruption, racketeering, leaks, espionage, treason, sedition, fraud, malicious and nefarious use of power, and partisan bias. It's unbelievable. You know, people use these words treason and sedition a lot. I want you to think about how John Kerry has been going to Iran and having these secret meetings, or Obama's fast and furious guns that went to our enemies and ended up killing our own people. I want you to think about the $150 billion in cash President Obama sent to Iran on pallets. That's probably being used as this so-called reward to take out President Trump. I want you to think about Benghazi, and we can go on and on and on. I don't have time to do it. But I want you to think about these two definitions. Treason, violation of the allegiance owed to a sovereign state against the Constitution, giving aid and comfort to our enemy. Here's the definition of sedition: stirring up resistance, discord, or rebellion against the government in power. Can you imagine if the rule of law was actually followed? We'll be back after the break, folks.
Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, please continue. You're on a rant.
I am on a rant. Thank you for allowing me, as always, Vince, to exercise my First Amendment rights. Continuing on this assessment using financial, economic, social, and political rationale, and I've given many, many specific details, folks, of proof of everything I'm saying over the past few months. That being said, we have a high level of lawless bureaucrats receiving kickbacks, especially under the guise of foreign aid. The Democrats abusing power, especially in Congress. We have criminal rogue intelligence agency sham court system that protects the elite and says that little guy has no group self-pity points, while the same people who are funding the banks, big tech, and Wall Street are claiming philanthropy, which is basically money to control the people. We have big corporate government now protecting itself along with big corporations. Again, that is fascism. We're not anti-government. We're anti-overspending government, too big government, corrupt government, and I've gone through this a million times on the air over the years. And while these people are doing this and protecting themselves, they're using censorship and surveillance to eliminate freedom, liberty, and control of people while feeding their own addictions to power, money, and control. And the fraud, when you look at big government, or let's take big corporations for a minute, look at the fraud with earnings. Look at the fraud with valuations. Now, I've spent a lot of time over the past year talking about the inversion of the yield curve and how when that uninverts, that's when you need to watch out. Well, the yield curve has uninverted, and that's typically when recessions start. Donald Trump inherited a fascist, corrupt system. How can a market be up 27%, which benefits basically the top 10% of stockholders, while the economy is growing at 2%? Where's the value of today's companies? How sustainable is that math? And this is the system we're in. The whole system is totally phony. It's totally made up. It's done by the printing of money, whether it be through some type of QE or quantitative easing or the repo rates, where the banks don't trust each other to balance their books for the old overnight rates. We've talked about this in detail. So I think the little people realize they have no protection, no rights, and no restitution under the law. Everything's either a Ponzi scheme produced by professional designated pot stirrers to guarantee divide and conquer, or more appropriately, divide to conquer strategies to eliminate the people's options and opportunities. And the technology is not for the benefits of the people. It's used as weapons for control for the plutocracy. We're seeing everything from forced tyranny to forced obsolescence. So the bottom 93% is not only having less prosperity, they're losing ground. They're losing life expectancy, losing opportunities. While the suicide rate goes up, the debt goes up, and we have no rule of law because it's all dependent on what group you're in. At the same time, the same people are manufacturing hate to distract them down and divide the American people. This is why you've heard me talk about practice what you preach laws. We need public forums to share ideas and solutions. We need citizen review boards. We need laws of access. Of excess, laws of excess, because the super wealthy are going to continue to put money into hidden NGOs, and money printing and subsidies and special interests and lobbying and PACs and foundations and all this other BS so they can hide and disguise where the money goes to control the people. So until the U.S. is given back to the people, we're going to continue getting corrupt socialists, fake Indians like Pocahontas of the Hiawatha tribe, yes, Elizabeth Warren. We're going to get more pedophiles, more bought and paid for under-the-table federal workers, and that includes intelligence agencies, phony, unearned jobs based on affirmative action and quotas under fake guise of fairness, equality, tolerance, and all these other BS politically correct words that have been hijacked by definition to use as tools to divide the people, and continue the sacrificing of our sovereignty, freedom, and liberty while selling America out to the highest bidder, while at the same time lowering the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job based on what group you're in, using dividing people based on their group, mostly for their vote, changing laws, games, scripts, and theater just for the vote. I'll be back after the break, folks.
USA Prepares, telling it as it is. Rich Scheben is delineating what's wrong, how pervasive it is, and how you need to pay attention to it. And what I've been trying to do in a humorous way is let you all know with doublespeak that America is not paying attention. It is your job to pay attention. Rich, please continue.
Yeah, well, even our people in Congress isn't paying attention. I mean, look at how they've gone against the Bill of Rights and Constitution. They keep saying the word democracy, humanitarian, Constitution, Bill of Rights. They say that it's a total gaslighting exercise. Do you know that Maxine Walker, who chairs the House and Financial Service Committee, didn't even know that the government nationalized student loans 10 years ago? How is this possible that a committee that chairs the banks did not know this? You know, we've gotten to the point where everything is false flags, lies, hoaxes, theater, propaganda, everything. Everything that comes from the to the left because they don't represent the people anymore. They represent the aristocracy. Forget about this left-right paradigm. It's mostly the aristocracy trying to manage and control the serfs. Okay? I've said this a million times for a reason. Let me get back to my rant here, Vince. So, if you stick up for the rule of law, common sense, logic, truth, free speech, objective facts versus subjective emotional opinions, you stand for the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. Supply and demand, free markets, you get labeled a racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, conspiracy theorist. And then we all get demonetized. While the powers that be are changing meanings of words. And one thing that they call us also, when you stick up for the rule of law, they call us a victim. While the true victims are lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a job because they feel entitled to play the victim group status card, and every politically correct, and let me just stop for a minute there. There was a story over the last 2 weeks when I was doing stuff. A professor at the Brooklyn, little sidebar here, a professor at Brooklyn College was accused of sexual harassment for saying that effort is 10% of the grade. You can't make this up, folks. If we do not judge by hard work, effort, proven results, and qualification, we only judge by what group you're in, then we will not have a country. Political correctness, we're so drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness, we can't sober up. We can't drive straight. That means there's no hope for future generations in America. So all this politically correct virtue signaling, and gestures are used to divide, dumb down our culture, traditions, heritage, history, and our whole country. We are going backwards full speed ahead. And the irony of all this self-righteousness coming from some certain groups, and especially the aristocracy, it's unearned. Most of their money is unearned. They get it through nepotism. And they're telling us how to behave when they're doing the same exact things they're telling us not to do. Whether it's Democrat group / aristocracy, whether it be a certain gender, sexual orientation, skin pigmentation. This is why we need practice what your priest laws. And all this stuff about Trump, my God, do you realize that over 90% of all news and information from the mainstream media about Donald Trump has been negative? You know, it's unbelievable how people judge Donald Trump. We don't know what happened. How do we know what happened regarding? I mean, Barack Obama dropped over 26,000 bombs and never asked for permission in his tenure. And here Trump basically assassinates a man who they had intelligence on to do more harm, not just against the American people, but against brown and black people too. We don't know. You've heard the term Monday morning quarterback, folks. It's unbelievable how many Monday morning presidents come out of the mainstream media. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors. The main reason, and I've said this before, that Donald Trump is trying to be impeached by the left is because the left is representing the elite. And Donald Trump said he's going to give America back to the people. That is the main reason for all these hoaxes. But, of course, you can be a community organizer with no qualifications and be president. Be a president. You know, the double standards and hypocrisy needs to be pointed out every day because the left is manufacturing precedents, eliminating due process, and one of the favorite, most obvious examples is the Kavanaugh effect, where all men do not believe in adult mutual consensual sex. Now they're all gang rapists. And, of course, Hillary Clinton, the Democrats, said that black men are super predators. Until we get indictments, folks, arrests, and all these declassifications they keep talking about, of the George Soroses of the world, we will have no peace we will have no freedom, and the million-plus combat soldiers who died for our freedoms and liberties will all be for naught. Everything is created today by focus groups and polls. It's all about manufacturing perception, manufacturing pity, guilt, and ideology. It's swaying public opinion and holding on to the narrative. That's all it is. I mean, pick a hoax, folks. The Covington kids, the Trump dossier, the Jussie Smollett's of the manufacturing of hate crime. How about Russia collusion? What about Ukraine? Everything that the left is saying the Republicans are doing, they've already done. And this is why the silent majority can be no more. Because they all care about is the vote. All they care about is to maintain their control and addictions to power, money, and control. Being an American can no longer be a spectator sport. We need to be tired of the talking and the division and the spying of the American people and certain groups crying wolf for decade after decade after decade after decade after decade and demanding entitlement and lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a job. This is why we need a constitutional party and eliminate the Democrat Party, because the Democrat, again, serves the interest of the elite. What's happened with the left-right paradigm has gone so far left that the left, through incrementalization, has literally become a communist socialist party. And the Republican right is right behind them. We need to get rid of the Democrat Party and have a Republican Party and a constitutional party. We absolutely need to fix voter and election fraud from all these deep state-owned voting machines. We have to fix immigration. It's got to be based on proper vetting and merit. You know, America used to be about making a good life for yourself and your family. It used to be that if you worked hard, you had proven results, you can get a good job and prosper. Now it's so corrupt, and they've used us against each other. The elite has poisoned us against each other by dividing us into groups. And now everything is based on what victim group status or protectionist group status you have. And this is why the elite has labeled this identity politics. So a lot of people cannot figure this out. And that's one of the reasons I mentioned just some of these articles that have materialized in the public domain over the last 2 weeks that I've been off the air. Who do we call, folks? Who do we call if there's a crime? Who do we call if we're being invaded? Who do we call if our water's been poisoned? Who do we call if our transformers have been shot and we have no more energy? Who do we call if we've been hacked? Who do we call? I really believe that the powers that be are the bought and paid for class. And nothing, and their entitlements, along with government jobs and big corporate bailouts and Congress, only care about the lobbyist PAC special interest. They don't even associate with us personally. All they care about is their funding and their reelection. The only way America's going to get out of this is if we organize as a people, as Americans, not by what gender we are, not by what gender we identify as, not what skin pigmentation shade we have, not by what religion or perceived ideology. When we allow the elite to give us this playbook for destruction, we only embolden the aristocracy. When you insult the work ethic, the ability, and the intelligence, and degrade and disrespect all these groups, you're not helping those groups or individuals. You're not empowering a nation. You're making the people more submissive and they break their will. That's how you destroy America from inside. When you reward mediocrity and make your country an icon for the law of diminishing returns. I've said this so many times, opportunity, knowledge, productivity, innovation, ingenuity will not be available for the bottom 93%. So, Vince, I want to thank you for allowing me to do my rant, and it's nice to be back on the air after a couple-week hiatus. And as you know, folks, we try and say it like it is here, because the mainstream media, Congress, the powers that be are doing everything to, again, produce lies, especially gaslighting, false flags, hoaxes, and propaganda. And that's all it is. It's up to us to do the reading and the research and to figure out what we need to do as a people, not just for prosperity, but for survival. Okay, Vince?
You know, I try to bring concrete points, connect the dots to things that are said here on USA Prepares. Let me give an example of a very small example of what Rich is talking about. So I got a bill on our bank statement, and I did a really dumb thing, and don't do this, class. I allowed a company called Intuit to withdraw from my bank account a payment of $12.95 about 5 years ago. And that was one of those introductory rates. And now it's $12.95 a month, and they keep slamming me with this. And I've turned off the service. I said, I don't want it. I don't need it. Stop charging me. Okay. So they did. And they charged me again. Let me tell you about Intuit. When we talk about corruption, I'm going to give you one small example of who Intuit is. You know, that's that company that has TurboTax. That's the company that has QuickBooks. That's the company that you probably think is a nice company. Let me tell you what they're really like. And this is what Rich was talking about. Intuit. We'll be right back. Rich Scheben's with us, and this is just one small example. So it's a $12.95 charge on our bank statement, and I tried to get it fixed, and it kept appearing. So we're talking about Intuit. So who's Intuit? Well, Intuit is an American business and financial software company that develops and sells financial accounting and tax preparation software and related services for small businesses, accountants, and individuals. Now, this is from Wikipedia. They're headquartered in Mountain View, California. Intuit produces TurboTax, a consumer tax preparation application, a small business accounting program called QuickBooks, Professional Tax Solutions, ProConnect, Tax Online, Pro Series, and Lacert. By the way, I have installed Lacert year after year after year, and it's very, very expensive for tax preparation companies. When I built networks, I've installed Lacert many, many times. And you got to buy a new copy every year because the tax code keeps changing every year. Okay. They have multiple payroll products. And so Intuit's the maker of TurboTax, and it's lobbied extensively against the IRS creating its own online system of tax filing. In most wealthy countries, governments have simplified tax filing for its citizens, thus making software such as TurboTax unnecessary for most citizens. As part of an agreement with the IRS, TurboTax allows individuals making less than $66,000 a year to use a free version of TurboTax. A 2019 ProPublica investigation revealed that TurboTax deliberately makes this version hard to find and deceptively steers individuals to search for the free version of TurboTax to the one that actually you have to buy. So TurboTax has tricked military service members to pay using filing software by creating and promoting a military discount and by making the free version hard to find when many service members are in fact eligible to use the free software. Okay, so now you know that TurboTax it's a revenue a little over $5 billion in 2017. So here's a company that is paying Congress to make your life more difficult. They are bribing these Congress thugs so that the tax code changes every year, so your version of tax preparation software, whether it be the really multi-$1,000 copy, Lacert, or the less expensive, around $100 copy of TurboTax for the individual, even though the tax code could be more simple and easier to understand and change less often. No. TurboTax, the Intuit company, is lobbying Congress to make it more difficult to keep you from being able to prepare your taxes by yourself. They don't want you to do that. They want you to buy their program. So it's so complicated that you typically have to hire somebody who uses Lacert, which they make. That's another program, the commercial version of tax preparation software, or the individual one, TurboTax. So it's so complicated that we have to rely on computers to figure out the numbers to pay our taxes, or hire somebody to use the software to figure out the numbers to pay our taxes. That is Intuit. That's who they are. So who are you going to call? Are you going to call your Congress critter who took a bribe from Intuit? How's that going to work? Are you going to call the police department? What would they do? Who would you call? There is nobody to call. Nobody. And yesterday and a couple days before, I decided I am determined to get my money back from those parasites, Intuit. And last night I was on hold at 5 minutes, pressing buttons to try to talk to a person. Okay? I finally get put on hold, and the next thing I know, this is all automated. I didn't talk to a person at that point. I've never talked to a person, recently. Well, here's what happened. Your estimated wait time is 50 minutes. That's 50 minutes, almost 1 hour. Now, who is going to be able to stay on the phone for an hour to try to get a $12.95 item resolved? Who's going to try to do that? I've already done it several times, and it keeps coming back. They just can't fix it. They keep billing me. I despise that company, Intuit. I despise them for their tactics, saying that we have a free product, but it's hard to find. Tricking people. Bribing Congress. That's where we are today. And that's just one lousy company. How about this one? How about Borden? Have you heard of Borden, Elsie the cow? In 1928, Borden had a truck that hauled milk, tanker truck. In 1928, it was glass lined. That was pretty impressive for 1928. When was the company founded? 1857. A dairy founded in 1857, 163 years ago. What's the newest information from Borden? They're bankrupt. Why? Why is that? Why are they bankrupt? Well, prices are rising. It costs more to feed cows, raise cows, milk cows. We all know that. We're farmers here. We know the costs are going up. And what else has happened? Walmart. Walmart has their own dairies. Walmart's put Elsie the cow, Borden, into bankruptcy. No kidding. We'll be right back. Rich has been spelling out very clearly what is going on and how many things are wrong with America. And if you listen to the news, if you read the news, I'm talking about the dinosaur news, the one that really lies, you'll learn, or you'll hear that inflation is no inflation, hardly at all. It's an absolute lie. If you look at auto parts, I'm going to talk about hidden inflation for just a minute. I'd love to hear Rich's comments. Talk about hidden inflation, inflation that you can't really see. It's not that obvious unless you really pay attention. Well, if you bought auto parts from a company called O'Reilly or AutoZone, and I know this for a fact because I have, in the past, many of the parts that you would buy would carry a lifetime guarantee. So if it failed, you'd get a new one. That's wheel hubs, bearings, water pumps, starters, alternators, shock absorbers, suspension parts, steering parts, all kinds of parts, lifetime guarantee. Well, that's pretty much gone. Now it's been replaced. If you buy the typical parts that would have a lifetime guarantee, it's now 1 year. 1 year warranty. That's hidden inflation. Okay? Because first of all, the parts are substandard. They're hardly ever as good as the original parts that came with your car. Now, it used to be back in the 1970s when I was racing cars, you would want to buy aftermarket parts because they were better than what GM or Ford or Chrysler put on the cars. The aftermarket parts were better. Now the aftermarket parts are worse. So the original bearings might last, 6, 7, 8 years, and the aftermarkets might last 2 years. And that's one of the reasons why they pulled the lifetime guarantees, because they didn't last very long. But they kept the prices the same or higher. So that's hidden inflation. Here's another example of in-your-face inflation, though, this time. Mobil 1 oil. Mobil 1 oil, if you buy it at the Chinese factory outlet, is just under $8 a quart. Y'all hear that? $8 a quart for engine oil. If you have a 5-quart crankcase, that's $40 plus tax, and tax for engine oil. We haven't put the oil filter on yet, and we haven't done any labor yet. This is for the oil. So I just wanted to share that with you, that if you think there's no such thing as inflation, I'm telling you that's not true. Every time I go to buy something that I have to have that's made in the United States, it's way more expensive than it was the last time. Way more expensive. I was looking at ratchets. A 3/8-inch drive ratchet, to spin nuts and bolts. Well, I'm really particular about some of the ones that I used in the past. Back in the 70s, in the 60s, I bought brand names like S.K. Wayne. Now it's traded as S.K. S.K. Wayne is what it used to be called. And a few Craftsman ratchets, not many, because I didn't like that they had coarse teeth rather than fine teeth back then. Husky, I really liked Husky. And I have a ratchet that was made back then. It's a flex head ratchet. And I looked up, if you go to eBay and you say flex head ratchets, 3/8-inch, 3/8 drive, vintage, meaning from the 60s and 70s, it'll be like $50, $60. If you want to buy a Snap-on, used. If you want to buy a Snap-on brand, it'd be like $130, used. So if you're thinking that there's no such thing as inflation, that is absolutely, positively not true. How did a used ratchet that's 60 years old end up costing $50 plus shipping? How's that possible? That's inflation. So if you want the good stuff, it's expensive. Now you can buy cheap Chinese stuff. It's less expensive. You can buy a new Chi-Com ratchet. Chinese communist Chi-Com ratchet for $15. But if you want that real good vintage one, $50 used plus shipping. So I just wanted to share with you that inflation is absolutely, positively here. Rich?
How much time do I have?
The rest.
I can give you the 5-minute version or the 25-minute version.
No, let's go for the full. Let's go for the full version.
Okay, super. You know how much I love talking about this stuff. Basically, folks, what inflation is meant to do is meant to create an illusion of wealth for the majority of people. When you look at how money supply has grown versus the working population, it's totally rigged. There's a major disconnect. And you look at, let's just take food, for example. Look how the packaging has gotten smaller. Look how the dollar has been devalued. Now, Vince, you'll agree that I've spent a ton of time over the last few years talking about inflation and deflation. Now, it's all different. I state that we're in a deflationary, stagflationary environment, but inflation is still high because of the money printing and the way the illegitimate Keynesian economics and corrupt monetary policies with the central banks are creating this. And inflation is different for every region and every lifestyle. Like where I used to live in the metropolitan area of New York City, inflation is a totally different calculation than what I would use in Montana living off-grid. Now, that being said, inflation is basically an increase in money supply, the simplistic version. So inflating the money supply out of the blue, out of the thin air, for a medium of exchange for whatever it is, brings down consumer confidence. And you throw in Keynesian economics and group identity politics, you start talking about what value, what are we producing? And I've talked about these repo rates, and QE. I even mentioned a little bit today. There's a lack of liquidity and velocity of money in the system. The banks don't trust each other. The banks are going broke, so they're doing this repo rate, repurchasing, and they're printing money by the billion, sometimes $100 billion per day. So that's all hidden inflation because that money goes into the system and usually goes to bail out the banks, to bail out Wall Street.
Did we lose Rich Scheben? Yeah. I'm looking at the status of the connection. We're connected, but Rich Scheben's gone, so I'm pretty sure he's going to call back, Jason. Okay? Jason, do you show that I'm connected with about a third of a second delay? Okay, great. Okay, that was Nathan. Okay, very good. So let me take it while we're waiting for Rich Scheben to connect. So we're talking about illusion of prosperity. Pier 1 imports. You've heard of those guys. They've been around for decades.
Yeah, Vince, I'm back.
Yes. I just mentioned that the illusion of prosperity, Pier 1 imports, is going to close up to 450 stores among bankruptcy fears. Pier 1. So they had, a lot of inexpensive items, furniture, that kind of thing. They're going down. Borden's bankrupt. And how about this? College students who are looking for financial aid will sign up for FAFSA. That's how it's pronounced. I don't know where they came up with that acronym, but FAFSA. And they're finding out that in the fine print to sign up for government assistance for college tuition, they have also registered for the draft. Yeah. And so now male college students are trying to cancel their financial aid so that they won't be drawn into the Middle East as targets because they decided to sign up for government assistance for tuition for college because college is so expensive. And here's what it says. And listen very carefully, please. Quote, this is how the draft works and the role of FAFSA in signing up for selective service. Quote, any person assigned the sex of male at birth who is between the age of 18 to 25 is required to register for the draft. Eligible citizens are required to register within 30 days of turning 18. Immigrants must register within 30 days of entering the U.S. If someone who is eligible for the draft has not yet registered, they're generally unable to get federal financial aid for higher education. FAFSA offers applicants a way to register for the draft in the aid application. Those who are ineligible for the draft exemption and who fail to register are not granted federal financial aid according to the Federal Student Aid Handbook. Draft exemptions include males currently in the armed service and on active duty, not including members of the Reserve and National Guard who are not on active duty. Males under the age of 18 at the time they complete their FAFSA, non-citizens of the U.S. who came to the country after turning 26 years old, and transgender males. And it goes on. The bottom line is you probably signed up for the draft if you completed the FAFSA form and have received financial aid. Now, check it out yourself if this involves you, and make sure you read it thoroughly, because it's possible we could be going to war. That's, back to you, Rich Scheben.
Okay, thank you. I don't know why I was disconnected. Actually, I do know why. Probably the powers that be don't like what I say, because I try and stick up for the little guy and basically show a lot of the corruption that's going on with the system. But anyway, going back to inflation, folks, I've given detailed shows on how central banks print money out of thin air, fractional reserve lending for the banks, and the welfare for the rich in the form of stock buybacks. So when you have stock buybacks and you have companies putting money, often via debt by selling bonds, not for expansion, new products or services or research and development or even people and new employees, but to boost earnings per share, not to mention acquisition and mergers, you are basically having a fixed amount, a finite amount of goods and services, and they're not increasing, which means the price will go up. Talking about inflation again, there's a lot of hidden inflations, with the expansion of, or the decrease of the containers for food, the money printing out of thin air, the fractional reserve lending to basically keep the corporations and banks afloat, and especially stock buybacks, which is, in a sense, welfare for the rich. Now, inflation for the bottom 93% regarding needs versus wants, pretty much everything that's a need is going up for the little guy. So that being said, when we talk about inflation, we got to talk about interest rates. Now, interest rates rise. If interest rates rise because of legitimate economic growth, that's good for stocks, that's good for equities, that's good for everybody, but we're not getting legitimate economic growth. President Donald Trump inherited so much corruption, so much fraud, that we don't even have an economic situation that runs on supply and demand. It's running on money printing, whether it be from the Fed and the central banks, monetizing debt via the Fed. The real rates of interest are really negative when you look at it from an investment perspective. The money you would get, or the money you do get, versus the interest you get for investing it. So if rates rise because of inflation, credit collapsing, the bond market has fallen, they can't sell bonds, that's not going to be good. That's usually heads towards a collapse. But the whole system is so phony. And I've gone, Vince, you can verify this, I have spent hours on the air talking in great detail about the unit of measures and calculations regarding CPI and inflation, regarding unemployment, regarding gross domestic product, and how nothing matters anymore. Nothing's real. Deficits, debt, nothing matters. Everything is fixed. Everything is rigged. Now, we've had 91 months in a row of increased home prices, mostly suburban urban, while taxes and insurance are going through the roof, and wages, for the most part, are going down. Savings are going down. You remember Lagarde said, it doesn't matter how much you have in savings as long as you have a job. Remember that? That's called control, okay? And debt's going up. And this is why we always talk about a solution is moving rural, buying land, growing food, raising animals, maybe hunting and fishing, maybe harvesting natural resources for things like heat and food and other things on your property, because the whole system is phony. Here's an article right here. Elizabeth Warren is a millionaire who's received tons of money from at least 30 billionaires over her political career. Now, this is common sense, folks. I'm not being condescending here, but do you really think that when someone goes into Congress, becomes a millionaire for doing nothing, for receiving money from 30 billionaires over her political career, do you really think she's representing the little people? No, she's representing the elite. Warren's net worth is somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million for not producing anything. Well, she did produce. She is Pocahontas from the Hiawatha tribe. So who knows? Maybe she'll get recognition of another Native American tribe. And of course, I'm kidding. You know, we've gotten to the point that when everything gets so rigged, so corrupt, and so filled with fraud, it's almost hard to even talk about definitions. When markets and fundamentals, fair value, leverage, and we have solvency and liquidity issues, and people don't even know the difference between inflation and deflation, and everything's over leveraged, and valuations don't make sense, and GDP is fixed, and debt's through the roof. Core businesses of corporations don't even matter anymore. Free markets and supply and demand and velocity of money and profits are literally words and phrases that don't have definitions. So, for the little people, because of things like you mentioned about Intuit, it's just like having a car right now where you can't work on it yourself. It's either forced obsolescence or they're making it so complicated that the little guy can't learn it or doesn't have the time to learn it. And so inflation, folks, is going to be different for different people based on their lifestyles and based on their regions. So even though we have a deflationary, stagflationary environment, now that they're printing money with this repo rate thing for the banks, they could literally overnight delegitimize the Federal Reserve note and send us into a huge...
Rich Scheben's with us, joining us. Kyle in Montana. Welcome, Kyle.
Good morning, gentlemen. I just got one little example of this inflation, that how things have so inflated. I like to look at old type aircraft and read about them and different things like that. And in the start of, or at the end, I should say, of World War II, excuse me, the United States was creating a jet bomber, and it was sort of ended up like a little trainer, a jet-powered aircraft, not a bomber. I'm sorry. Anyway, and at the end of this little blurb explaining it, and then I went into some more, it said it cost $140,000 to develop this jet. It did not see any action or anything in World War II, but anyway, it says in today's money, that would be $1.53 million. And that just blew my mind. You know, you think about that. And then I'll hang up here in just a second. But, Rich, I've got two terms I would like you, and I'll hang up and listen. But I've got two terms I would like you to explain maybe a little further. I think I know what they are, but I'm not quite positive. One is the term you've used called velocity of money. And then the second term is the repo rate. That sounds like the rate at which they're repossessing houses or something. I don't quite, and I'm sure there's other people that don't quite grasp all of that either, and maybe I've just missed it, but I think I've listened to the whole program. But anyway, if you could, I'll hang up and let you go on, and I'd like to understand those a little better.
Okay, Kyle.
Sure.
One thing, Kyle, before you leave, you and I are scheduled for Friday at 9:00. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
9
sounds
o'clock
good.
your time, right?
Right.
Yep.
9:00 our time. Great. I'll see you then. Thanks.
All right,
thanks for calling in, Kyle.
You bet.
Okay, what the repo rate is, folks, is I talk about that, the repurchase. It's basically the banks. They have to balance their books on the overnight rate, which is every day. So the bank reserves are almost gone. In other words, the banks are going broke. It's not just a liquidity issue, it's a solvency issue. And you got to ask yourself, how can banks go broke with fractional reserve lending, and where they need, say, $10 on hand to lend out $100? I mean, how can you allow a business to fall through the cracks with that type of lack of balance and illegitimacy? But this whole system is so corrupt. It's basically, the best way to put it is another QE, another quantitative easing, another printing money out of thin air. And that's the best, simplest way to look at the repo rates. When people say that, That's exactly what's happening. This is just like quantitative easing or QE1, QE2, QE3. It's printing money out of thin air to protect the elite. Welfare for the banks. Welfare for the big corporations. And a lot of that money is going into, and we don't even know where the money's going. Just like Dr. Mark Skidmore discovered that we have $21 trillion missing that supposedly went to the DOD and HUD. Well, that's a lot of money. So when we don't know what we're printing and where the money's going, and we're sending billions of dollars of cash to our enemies via pallets, no one knows anything. The whole system is illegitimate. So they have to basically keep the system alive with Keynesian economics, with a demographic system that I've spent a lot of time, which is the biggest growth group through 2050 in America are old people. Old people are not spenders because they're going broke. They're dying. So the system has to keep itself alive by printing money, and that goes to the velocity of money. Velocity of money is, let me give you an example. Let's say me, you, and Vince's family were lined up in a line. And the velocity of money, okay, I gave you, Kyle, $10 for a product or a service. Then the next day you gave $10 to Vince. The next day Vince gave $10 to one of his family members or a neighbor or a store down the street. But it was only done every day. Velocity of money means that when I talk about velocity of money, it means in the context of speed and how much money is changing hands. So when the velocity of money slows down to one purchase per day versus a thriving economy, which could be 10 purchases per day, where that money goes from Peter, Paul, Mary, John, Sue, Mary, and just keeps going several times a day. That's a healthy velocity of money. That's a healthy economy. But we have so much debt, from household debt, government debt, and mostly corporate debt, that we're so over-leveraged and people are afraid. And that's one of the reasons I give a lot of these statistics. You know, like the one I gave earlier, where 70% of Americans, I have the article right here, basically don't have $1,000 in their savings. And here's another article right here where companies are borrowing more money to create the illusion of profitability. Again, that goes back to stock buybacks and everything I just mentioned. So we need to look at a lot of these barometers or measurements of what a healthy economy is. But if we got to continue to print money out of thin air, and it goes to the elite, and then the money goes into the system, again, not for the expansion of companies, new infrastructure, new products or services, or research and development, or employees. It's going to literally, and not even acquisitions and mergers, it's going into share buybacks, dividends, and executive cash. And they put it all in their pocket through the cashing in of stock options, which is one example. So the money is being printed at an alarming rate and not getting to the people, because the elite want the people to be their slaves. They need the people, the little people, to pour their coffee. They need the little people for all this stuff. And that's what makes the economy churn. But see, we don't have a capitalistic economy anymore. So when you hear the left saying, oh, capitalism's bad, it's because capitalism, because of greed, because of fraud, because of corruption, is no longer capitalism. And stock buybacks is just one example. So when the people see that the money is going, then not only are they creating more debt and less expansion for the people, they're seeing the executives and CEOs' pockets get filled with cash at the expense of the cost shifting to the little people. And everything is being cost shifted. and I've mentioned this article a few times before. It's an inflation chart. It was like the top few inflations, and this is probably, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 months old, but I love this chart because it really shows and it explains how political correctness works. And this is one of the reasons, folks, that I always try and dovetail financial, economic, social, and political issues together. What this chart shows, making a long story short, is hospital services, educational textbooks, college tuition, car insurance, medical care services, and prescription drugs are the 6 highest. So basically, health care, things to do with college, and medical insurance, or things to do with medical, the highest, I mean, prescription drugs, they have like an 800% inflation rate. Well, why is that? Because we have illegal immigrants coming here. They can go into an emergency room visit and not have to pay for it, so you have to pay for it through cost shifting. How about college? Well, when we give free college away to certain people because they come from a certain area or whatever group they're from, the cost shifting occurs to the people. Why is car insurance so expensive? Well, certain states are giving driver's license to illegal immigrants. When they get in the car, do you think they have car insurance? If you do, please send me a check and I will buy a bridge and put it in your name. It's all the cost shifting at the highest levels of inflation is being paid for by the little people. So when you have this kind of debt, and this is why I've given so many lectures, if you will, about bonds and interest rates and just the overall debt situation. And so many people thought interest rates were going to go through the moon. I said, not yet. Because remember when they raised the 10-year yield to like a little over 3% and everything came crashing down a couple of years ago? We have too much debt for commerce. And this is also affecting consumer confidence as well. So people are holding on to their money more. People are voting with their feet. They're leaving the high taxes and insurance states like the West Coast and the Northeast and the Illinois of the country. And they're going to Florida, Texas, and especially the Rocky Mountain states. Now, you can look at statistics all day long and say, well, this isn't so. Well, you can look at Montana, for example. The population base is going into the mountains, the Missoulas, the Kalispels, the Bozeman's, and a lot of the rest of the state might have water issues, might be, flat land, might be more windy, might be considered uninhabitable by some people. It all depends on your interests and hobbies. As I always say, live where you recreate. So statistics and data can also be skewed so the powers that be can deliver the message that they want so they can control the people. So did I explain that stuff okay, Vince?
Well, let's put it this way. In simple terms, the velocity of money is the rate at which money turns over. When we say money, we're not talking really money. We're talking about digits. Okay, we'll call it cash. We'll talk about currency. The rate at which currency turns over, purchase to purchase to purchase, or person to person to person, or institution to institution, like a store to a customer to a store to the next customer and so forth. And the repurchase rate is the repo rate, which is the short version of repurchase rate, is describes banks borrowing money so they are liquid tomorrow. The overnight banking borrowing rate. And that's what that is. So in simple terms, it's banks borrowing money so they can stay liquid for tomorrow. It's just overnight. So when the velocity of money slows down, people spend it more carefully. When the velocity of money slows down, people are putting their digits into savings, or they're paying off debt. It's not going from person to person to person to person to person. That is what the velocity of money is, and that is what the repo rate is. Robert in Kansas is on hold, and he will be with us right after these few short commercial announcements. Rich Scheben's with us. Class, if I were to sum up the salient point of Rich Scheben's class presentation today in 6 words, it would be the following. Quote, there is no one to call. There is no one to call. End quote. You're on your own. Be careful whom you trust. More and more people are not honoring the commitments they've made, commitments of any kind. And people are more cavalier with commitments they make, meaning, well, yeah, I really didn't mean that. I said but no, no. No, I said I'd pay you on Tuesday, but that $200, well, I needed it because I had another problem. I had to pay this other guy, so I can't pay you. So as soon as I'm done paying him off, I can start paying you off, and maybe I'll be able to pay you soon. Maybe, in a week, maybe. Robert in Kansas, welcome.
Good morning, gentlemen. I was wondering if you thought that we should draft women into the military and then kill them on the front lines with a war with Iran. Does that sound like a good idea?
Robert, where do you come up with this stuff?
Well, I'm just wondering, since we're equal now, wouldn't it be kind of a sexist thing not to draft women into the military and force them into combat on the front lines?
I know I know where you're going with this, and I understand your philosophy. However, I feel that every group, including women, have been used to lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job in the military as a job. If we would have kept our standards and expectations for each job high, like it was many years ago, we wouldn't have these division issues. So if the standards are high and someone can compete and pass the physical or the written tests with high standards without dropping it down based on what group you have, meaning lowering the qualifications, if they could do that, I'm all for it. I don't care what group anybody's from. I have a problem with lowering the bars of standards and expectations, which creates division, which foments hate. And one of the worst things that has happened to this country across the board for every job is the lowering of bars of standards and expectations based on what group you're in. And this has metastasized, Robert, like a cancer throughout all of the mainstream media, politics, corporate America, big government. It's gotten to the point where the bars and standards have been so low that we can't even compete anymore in society and consumerism. So that's my comment on that.
Robert, before you ask another question, what is your thought? Do you think women should be on the front lines of the military and have targets on them as well?
Well, you put women on the front lines of combat, you're a Satanist. You're satanic. You understand? You're an evil person. And so, that's what we're dealing with, guys. You never bring up the evil that is responsible for all this. They teach you in school that men and women are equal, separate, that they're your competitor, and you guys believe it. You got to understand you're being lied to. Woman was made to be a companion of man, not an equal, free entity, separate from him. And so,
Robert,
this idea that
Robert,
Robert, you got into a little bit of a tangent. Statistically, worldwide, combat deaths are 99.9% man. Workman mortality is 94% male. Homicides and suicides are 76 and 75% respective. So male privilege is not a thing. Trust me. It's all about taking down the people, divide and conquer, and that's what it's all about. I totally agree that women should be protected. However, when the powers that be are misrepresenting women and saying that you need to do this and do that and demand to feel entitled and cry wolf and lower the bars of standards and expectations, just like this Kavanaugh thing. All the women who, with the Kavanaugh effect, said they lied except for that Blasey Ford, whatever her name is. You cannot allow a separate tiered system of rules, laws, and accountability or group identity politics or victim group status to apply. So I'm not disagreeing with your last comment. I'm saying that if political correctness was controlled, we wouldn't be using all these people and all these groups to lower the bars of standards and expectations.
Rich Scheben, just a quick comment. Robert, did I hear you say that Rich Scheben and I are evil because we think that men and women are equal in the eyes of God? Did I hear you say that?
That absolutely is Satan's order to place women above or beside man. That is the order of Satan. That's what that is. God's order places man above woman in all respects.
So I just want to make sure I hear this before I throw you overboard for good. Did you say that Rick Scheben and I are evil? Is that what you said?
Absolutely not, Vincent. I said the order that we are taught is satanic. That's what I said. You and Rich Scheben, I love you guys. I'm saying
okay,
that
I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to make sure I heard
wrong,
you.
Vincent, is what I'm saying. Okay.
I wanted to make sure I heard you very clearly, because if you said I was evil and you said Rich Scheben, you'd be out of here forever. All right, Robert, thank you for your call. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Rich Scheben, thanks so much for being with us.
Always a
By the way, class, you're hearing my temper getting shorter and shorter.